Michael Simas, Chief Executive Officer, Florida Council 100. This is an incredible time for Florida. Must be very exciting to be in your seat and doing what you're doing. Let's talk about before you came to Florida, what were you doing?
Sure. No, glad to talk about it. And thanks for having me here today,
Yeah.
Jay. Couldn't be more excited. So a lot of my career, I grew up in New England and Rhode Island, and then moved to New York right after college. And a lot of my career was in New York City at a similar organization to the council. So a group called the Partnership for New York City, which is about 300 of the big Fortune 500 CEOs headquartered in New York. And our work was really built around engaging the private sector on behalf of the public good. And we did that through leadership and policy and investment. We had a $150 million investment fund that allowed us to invest directly in economic development projects to help scale the economy. So I've had this long career, remarkably, around kind of connecting CEOs and private sector leadership around tough public sector problems and then leveraging that asset to go fix it. So here, this role at the council is kind of a continuance of that. And it's fun here, right? You get to play a little more offense than defense than you do in a market like New York.
Dream job, dream change.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about all the great work that you're doing and exciting things. Were you initially interested in public policy and government? And what were the steps that led you to the partnership role in New York City?
Sure. So, like I said, I grew up in Rhode Island and was a political science major at URI, which is our state school there, and got an internship when I was 19 or so with our U.S. Senator, a guy named Link Chafee.
Okay.
And I just loved it. So that was my kind of first foray into government and politics.
Were your parents in politics?
No, not at all.
Okay.
So this was just kind of luck. I found my place, was able to connect and got this internship in Providence in the district office. I wasn't in Washington, and just found really interesting the ability that government had to influence people's lives. And what you do in a district office for a U.S. Senator is a lot of constituent services, right? It's a lot of helping people find their way at the VA or figuring out a tax problem. And you engage with people in kind of their hand-to-hand issues that are really problematic in their life, and you're able to fix them, right? Because you've got the ability to find the right lever of power in government or connect them to the right person. And that was really my first experience and exposure to government. And working in government was in the U.S. Senate as an intern for a couple of years. So I kind of finished my run in college. My girlfriend at the time, my now wife, was from North Jersey, and I said, why don't I start looking for a job in New York? That seems to make sense for a lot of reasons. And I ended up at the Partnership for New York City. I kind of applied for a number of jobs. The CEO at the time, who just retired a couple months ago, a woman named Kathy Wild, was hiring for an assistant. And you know, when you're looking for a job in New York, you just want a foot in the door.
Exactly.
So I applied for that, took the Amtrak down, had an interview. And I remember her saying, like, you don't want to be my assistant, but you've got a government relations background. Maybe in a few months, something will come up. And sure enough, I kind of waited. A job came up, and I started running government relations at the partnership. And that's where I really learned how City Hall worked and how Albany worked through that experience in New York, and just kind of built my way up through the partnership to be executive vice president for the last half of my career there. And took a stint. I worked for General Electric for a period of time, for a couple of years in the middle there, running government relations for them. But really my background, is around political activity, lobbying, advocacy in those early phases of my career. And then as I grew to kind of run the partnership with Kathy, it was that whole toolkit. How do you leverage communications and our investment portfolio and our access to CEOs to really influence public policy in a way that helps New Yorkers?
So you really started out as a problem solver. You rolled up your sleeves. You said, this is new to me, but I'm going to get in here. I'm going to help people. I'm going to collaborate. I'm going to build relationships within the organizations that you join. And this is important. This show is called The Long Game. And for those of you listening, you took a role that you were overqualified for, but it was to get your foot in the door. And then you just added so much value that they rewarded you with promotions and with growth in the organization.
That's exactly right. And that's how it's worked my whole career. I think when you see an opportunity, right? You figure out a way to add value. And I've always said yes to opportunity. Even if it doesn't seem like the perfect fit, generally once you get into the role, you can figure out what the opportunities are and figure out where you can add value to the organization and find a path.
And the work that you did at the partnership, and you were there for over a decade, how did that evolve? What were some of the things that you're happy that you got accomplished there?
Yeah, so I started in kind of the early 2000s, early in Mayor Bloomberg's first term, where New York was recovering from 9/11, but there was this tremendous momentum around the city's growth prospects. And what Mayor Bloomberg did was really brought incredible talent to city government and made city hall and city government really interesting and cool, right? So you had all these McKinsey partners and law partners coming in to work in local government, which is really unusual.
Yeah.
And you had this asset base in City Hall in New York that was so focused on these aspirational goals, like getting the Olympics was a huge thing we worked on in the early 2000s. And that's what led to the rezoning throughout New York City and what became Hudson Yards, because capping the railways on the west side of Manhattan was originally supposed to be the Olympic Stadium as part of the proposal. And then it evolved to this incredible mixed use development that we've now got on the west side of Manhattan. So seeing all of that, right, play out at the same time, they were kind of redeveloping Lower Manhattan and the World Trade Center, testifying through all those zoning processes about why this type of redevelopment matters to the city and to the city's future, and then tying all of that to the economy, right? Like, what's our growth play? What are we trying to achieve through this type of commercial redevelopment? And then how does it benefit New Yorkers? New York teaches you very quickly that you've got to stay focused on equality and making sure that everybody in the neighborhood kind of benefits from this type of investment.
You're going to hear from it.
Yeah, exactly. So seeing that process play out, and I think now in Florida, as you look out over the next 20 years, what happened in New York over 25 years is you've got a majority of the population who decided capitalism wasn't working for them, right? And then decided to elect a Democratic Socialist mayor because that was a better option for New Yorkers, which is an interesting story for us.
We'll see how that plays
right?
out.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I don't think it'll ever happen here, but I think what it reminds us is it's important to ensure that capitalism is helping everybody, right, in the state. And that's really what the council thinks about. Yes, we've got this incredible growth opportunity.
That's an important point.
In Southeast Florida, but how's it going to benefit the rest of Floridians over the next 50 years? And if Florida can get that right, there aren't a lot of states who've gotten that right as they've grown exponentially as we are now.
So Florida enacted a law called Live Local to encourage affordable housing. And as real estate developers, we have to look at the economics and cost and profits and revenues and risks and financing to develop. And in a lot of places, they disincentivize or they look at developers as sort of the bad guys. But Florida's done a really smart thing with enacting this Live Local and made it economically advantageous and beneficial for developers to build more affordable housing by giving developers more density, more height, and increasing the economic investment and yield for those in the lower income brackets as well as others who are buying and renting in these buildings. So that's a really important point.
And I just say on that point, Tallahassee was 2 years ahead of this potential friction point on affordability and really went after it aggressively, right, with this solution that you just described through Live Local. So I think it's an interesting case study of how Florida, people kind of view Florida as this conservative, right-leaning government, but in fact, they're really subsidizing the highest need of affordability as the state scales, which is the exact role government needs to be playing.
Exactly. They're aligning incentives and they're incentivizing real estate developers to build more rather than making them the enemy and not allowing them to build in other parts of the country that we're seeing in these other states and cities that are having huge problems with affordability and the supply of units.
Yeah.
So Florida's really ahead of the game. Going back to New York and Bloomberg. Bloomberg, obviously a very successful business person. And you mentioned he recruited talent and really people invested who had business experience to help. And that was a catalyst for growth and enacting positive change in New York. So how important is that in your role today, recruiting the top talent to Florida? How do you guys think about building the right team and roster?
Yeah, no, that's critical. I mean, for us, when you think about the whole state, right, and we've got 200 CEOs who are members of the council in all regions of the state, all industries and sectors. And Florida's got an incredible pipeline that's already built for talent. I mean, we've got the #1 higher education system in the country for 9 years in a row, right? Wow. Which we don't talk enough about.
People don't talk about that.
And it's incredible. And then when you actually think about how impactful that system is from a cost perspective. So if you live here and you've moved here from New York and you've saved $400,000 for your son or daughter to go to college, right? And you get down to this market and realize, oh, they can go to UF for $6,500 a year,
wow,
which is remarkable, right?
That is
and that really changes people's quality of life when you think about, to your point, the long game, when you're thinking about family planning and wealth and the next generation, to take that college cost off the table for Floridians when they move here is incredible. And to be honest with you, if you've got the academics to get into UF because it's become so competitive, you're going to go for free because the state has an academic scholarship once you reach that threshold anyway. So it's really incredible. So if you're got kids who are performers and you're out of market and it's becoming harder and harder to access these Florida universities because they've become so competitive. There's a debate right now in Tallahassee about capping the number of non-Florida residents that are allowed to be admitted to state schools so that Floridians have more benefit. Back to the point we just made, Tallahassee thinking about Floridians, right? How do we make this growth work for the whole state? Then you can start saying, oh, this is actually really interesting in a number of ways beyond just my business or what I'm hearing about Florida. So when you think about that talent pipeline in our state college system, and there's a group called Career Source statewide that does all of the credentialing for CTE type jobs in Florida, we've got this incredibly nimble talent pipeline that's responsive to the economy and business needs, unlike any I've seen in the country. I mean, I think we've just got alignment and centralized control over our education system that allows businesses to quickly benefit from talent being produced locally.
A lot of people don't know that, so I'm glad that you're highlighting that. One of the knocks on Miami and South Florida is our school system, elementary, middle school, high schools. What are you seeing to solve that, combat that, and really attract some of the talent and other corporations that do want to be here, but they may not have enough good schools for their kids?
Sure. I mean, there's a great group called the Partnership for Miami. That's a few years old that Raul Moss runs, and it's got the CEOs from here in Miami working together to solve problems just like this. And they're highly focused on the public education system and doing great work and bringing in new options, right, to create a market for education, like Success Academy coming to market, a really highly rated charter school system out of New York. Now coming down to Florida, I think with a $50 million investment to kickstart that. So I think the local business leadership, which is appropriate, is really focused on those local challenges like education, infrastructure, and those community issues that you've got to get right to have an environment to scale. And you see that up and down the Gold Coast, which is really Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach counties together. And our view at the council is the combination of that economic ecosystem is really compelling globally because it increases our MSA in size. All of a sudden, you can really compete with New York and San Francisco and LA and London and Stockholm, right? And you think about Southeast Florida in a little bit of a different metric than just one city or just one county. And as you start to combine those assets really effectively, and you can see what's going on in Palm Beach too. We've got Vanderbilt coming to market on the private higher education side. We've got a number of new private institutions coming to market that can allow for more incoming on the business side and account and accept more incoming on that growth for people with families. So I think all of that in an interesting way, we're kind of living through the development of this next phase of Florida's growth from an economic perspective. And all of these infrastructure components, whether it's K through 12 education or pre-K even prior to that, all have benefits down the line as the state continues to grow. And that's where you kind of get at that equality issue that we opened with really early in the conversation.
Let's talk about infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's important. We have traffic, our airports. All of this is a key factor. And as our population's growing, we have over 20 million people now. More and more companies are moving here. What are you seeing infrastructure-wise, Tallahassee, in the cities, local counties, to improve and really project where we need to be with the infrastructure?
Yeah, so I think you're seeing, we've got assets around like Brightline. It's a terrific asset that moves people in and out of these really dense, congested markets.
And a lot of people use it.
A lot of people use it. Yeah, terrific. And then continuing to build out mass transit here in Southeast Florida. So I think it's different in different parts of the states where you've got real density, you've got issues around movement of people and infrastructure, and we've got to get that right. Because if we don't, all of a sudden Southeast Florida feels just like New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, right? And that's not what we want. That's what everybody fled from. So we don't want 3-hour commutes here in Southeast Florida. But here, the upside is opportunistically, Florida does not have century-old legacy investments in infrastructure like some of these other markets do. And we've got a blank slate when you think about the future of urban mobility and moving people around and some of the stuff you're seeing right here now, right? Urban mobility in the air. unmanned 4-person drones that'll get you from Miami to Palm Beach in 15 minutes for the price of an Uber Black potentially. That type of infrastructure development that you could never deploy in any of these dense legacy markets because they're so constricted, we can actually pull off in Florida because we've got this blank slate. So as far as infrastructure and transportation, I'm excited about kind of seeing what we deploy here, which will be the next generation of people movement. And we can kind of be part of implementing that next phase of urban mobility here in Florida because we've got such a blank slate to work with.
We do have a blank slate. We don't have this legacy projects that the train track and rail to nowhere in California.
Exactly.
Over $10 billion, and they don't have any train tracks. Your role as Chief Executive Officer, Florida Council 100, how did you join? What was the process? We were talking about it a little bit before the show.
Yeah, so a little inside baseball, I guess, but there are about 22 states with these CEO organizations, these business roundtables, and we all get together once a year to talk about issues.
What are the other states?
California's got one, Colorado, Minnesota, Louisiana. I was on a call this morning with Texas, Louisiana, and Colorado talking about their issues. So when I was in New York, when I was in New York, we would get together every year and meet and talk. So I got to know a gentleman named Bob Ward, who was running the Florida Council of 100 at the time. Mm-hmm. And when we moved to Florida with my family, I kind of come off of a Wall Street stint and took some time off. We moved down here the end of the pandemic. And I was kind of looking for what's next. I'd just been a chief of staff to a CEO at a big bank. And I thought that's probably where I'd end up. So I called Bob, who had all these Florida CEOs. I said, listen, I'm in town now. Let me know if anything comes up. I'd love to talk to some folks if they want, like, a chief of staff from New York and that type of energy and ambition. I'm looking for what's next, right? And it just worked out that he was kind of getting ready to wrap up his career at the council. And we had a conversation, and I hadn't contemplated going back to this public-private life that I had done in New York for so long. But really, when I took a look at Florida and where we were as a state and the opportunities ahead of us, it became really interesting and compelling to me to kind of get back to this. It's not public service, but it's nonprofit and it's public-oriented work on behalf of the private sector, and think through kind of what this next phase of growth can look like for Florida. And thought maybe my background in New York, right, going through that growth phase and some of the challenges we faced there could add a lot of value to the conversation here. And that's really how it happened. It was one of those things you don't plan for, you don't expect. But when opportunities present themselves, as we said earlier, you take advantage of them and then figure out how you can put your imprint on the organization to really make a difference.
And you're partnering with incredible CEOs, the top CEOs throughout the state.
That's right.
So that's, you're working with common sense people, successful people, doers, people who are used to getting things done. So that must put you in a good position.
That's right. And you're able to move the needle almost immediately on anything. And that's the great thing about the council. So these CEOs don't come to the council to talk about their business or their company or their industry. Our mandate is really you take that hat off and you put your Florida hat on and you think about the state over the long term, beyond political cycles, because CEOs have a long-term strategic line of thinking, right, when they plan. So we're able to be that institutional knowledge on behalf of the state to think about 50-year issues like water quality or resilience or affordable housing and infrastructure that outlast a 2-year political cycle, right? And keep focused on those issues that are going to matter in 30 years that maybe don't matter today, and make sure we get those right. So that's the upside of an organization that really commits private sector assets to these public challenges, because to your point, you get these best-in-class thinkers who come out of their company box but apply that same skill set to Florida's challenges that really drive value for the state.
What a high-powered organization. So you're taking the top executives in Florida who are in business, they've been successful, they have a track record, and everyone is working together to think about the future of Florida, how to improve our infrastructure, our schools, the lifestyle. Wow. So there's no wonder that Florida is doing so well. So many people want to be here. What were some of the first initiatives when you got into the role that you thought about, you planned, and you acted on?
Sure. So the first thing we did was really looked at the state economy. And I would go around the state. We've got CEOs all over the state and ask them kind of what the challenges are, and those are similar, right? It's resilience, making sure we're resilient to storms when they come. How do we start to commercialize
people
that
always
asset
talk
and get
about,
it right?
hurricanes.
And we can talk about that. We just did a big piece on it, but my focus was really on the growth play. And do we know what our assets are and what we want to bring to market instead of just taking organic economic development as the state's done successfully for decades, right? Florida's grown 3-4% for a long time just by people driving down 75 and 95 and moving here.
So you're moving the needle. You're pushing. You're
We're kind of
advancing
saying, what if we flip this game on its head and oriented economic development around private sector growth, right?
Yeah.
And identify, to our point about wages and making sure all Floridians benefit, what we did with McKinsey is said to them, look at all 6 regions of the state, 3 on the East Coast, 3 on the West Coast, and let's pick the 3 or 4 high-wage, resilient job sectors where we've already got a base built. We've got a talent pipeline. We're beating other jurisdictions, and let's just identify those as a starting point, right? So that's the work we did.
Yeah.
And then what that gave me was a tool to give all of our CEOs around the state to say, yes, you're in Miami, but you should know that Jacksonville's got this incredible distribution and e-commerce ecosystem when you're in Chicago talking to colleagues and they ask you what's going on in Florida.
Right.
So the first thing we need to do is define our areas of focus, right? And do a better job for me communicating that first to our members, right?
Yeah.
And then to government and then to the media. So everybody was on the same page around the assets we wanted to scale in Florida. Because to the point we talked about before, this rate of growth leads to friction. And it leads to constraint in density unless you plan for it. So we're in a position now where we can say, we don't necessarily want that type of growth, but we really do want this because it brings high wages for Floridians and really resilient jobs that help balance our economy's base on hospitality and tourism. So we defined what the ecosystem looks like.
Hospitality and tourism.
Still huge, still almost 40% of the state economy.
What else? Finance?
So we said, we've been relying on hospitality and tourism for so long. Let's build and diversify our economy away from that, right?
Yeah, that's
so that
smart.
we're less reliant, because that industry can dip really aggressively in a downturn and it's hard to come back. So what we said was, all right, Southeast Florida, finance, huge industry, $150 billion industry in Southeast Florida. Healthcare ecosystem, which is traditionally low wage, but all of a sudden you add life sciences and med tech and research to that and the wages come up. So how do we bring these emerging sectors into our foundational asset and help the whole industry scale? So we looked at that in each of the regions around the state and just started communicating and aggregating resources in each of these regions around these policies. And the state's been a terrific partner. The Department of Commerce has been following this work of best bets and is really aligning the state's talent pipelines around these opportunities in the state. Because our assessment was, if we can focus and communicate clearly what our assets are, it helps everybody.
Let's talk about the blocking and tackling
Yeah.
of that. So you've defined the areas that you want to focus on. What's next to bring those companies here and actually bring the bodies, bring the jobs, bring the investment?
Sure. So now that we've defined it and we've got clarity in our focus and message, right? What we announced 2 weeks ago is this new campaign called Ambition Accelerated. That's being initially capitalized through our foundation by Steve Ross and Ken Griffin. And it's a $10 million campaign this year. With the purpose is really just to inform CEOs, founders, and investors around the country the reality of living and working in Florida. So what are the assets that we've got here? The education toolkit that we just talked about that we don't talk enough about out of market is core to what we're communicating. Kind of the business base case that we've got here, and that this Southeast Florida ecosystem is the fastest growing MSA in the country, right? For 3 years in a row. Let's communicate this stuff across the country and then also do it in a way that's polished and professional and sophisticated coming out of Florida to reset the narrative around what people think about bringing their business here, which when you go to New York and San Francisco, particularly California, people just don't know a lot about Florida because their natural progression is to Texas. It's closer, they're more familiar with it, and that's kind of where they've moved. We get a lot of New Yorkers. New Yorkers know about Florida. It's been happening for a long time. But for us, we kind of, when you go to California and talk to people, they just don't know anything about Florida. So we said that's a gap. And the business community's got to fill that gap because otherwise the vacuum's going to get filled by somebody else. So we should get out in front and put the actual data out there, which is almost all in our favor, and inform people about the opportunity that exists here. And that's why it's so important. The other thing you can do once you identify these assets by region is really work to have the regions work together, which is what we're doing with the Gold Coast, and really rebranding the region from just being 3 counties separately advocating for economic development to one single Gold Coast of Florida that runs from Miami all the way to Palm Beach and offers different things for different companies as they need them, right? The entire ecosystem can support a multitude of opportunities coming from out of market more than any individual county could on its own for things like density and other issues that we're talking about.
You guys are doing a good job of getting the word out. It's how we met.
It's good. We're happy, yeah.
Connected, and we're happy to help spread the word as well. I grew up in Southern California, and I can attest that people in California, they don't know much about Florida.
Yeah.
They just think it's humid in the summers and there's a lot of bugs. So yeah, it's good to get the word out. 2026, there's a lot of momentum. Florida's had momentum since COVID, and we opened up early in June. Let's talk about 2026, the recent news updates, people moving here, CEOs. What are you seeing in your seat? You have a front row seat, and you're in some of these conversations.
Sure.
What's exciting you about this year?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing now is, and this is built on decades of work from
Yeah.
people, particularly here in Miami, Melissa and Manny Medina building eMerge and this huge tech ecosystem that exists in Miami, Mayor Suarez's advocacy work over the last couple of years, right? So we're kind of standing on the shoulders
Yeah.
of the local people who've been building this for over a decade. And now I think we're at a point where the entire ecosystem's turning on,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
you're seeing it go from yellow to green, and everybody is eyes on Florida. And that's for a number of reasons. That's political. The White House South is in Palm Beach,
Yeah.
right? And there's a spotlight on Florida from a political presidential perspective. There is a spotlight on Florida from an economic development perspective when you just look at our growth curve. And then there's a spotlight on Florida from kind of a responsible fiscal governance perspective. You're seeing a ton
Balanced
of
budget.
press this week comparing New York City's $127 billion proposed budget to our 117
Yeah.
state budget, right?
Yeah.
So when people start to see that narrative,
And we
it
have
starts to make
23
sense.
million people
That's right.
in Florida.
Compared to 8 in the
Yeah,
city.
exactly.
So when you think about, if you're a CEO in Southern California and you're thinking about deploying capital for the next decade, a large lump of a couple $billion in capital, the thing you need is certainty that capital is going to go to what
That's
you
right.
wanted to invest in.
That's right.
So what you're getting now in coastal markets is uncertainty around what that capital is going to invest in, because the rules are changing with such frequency that you can't plan for it. And what that does is make CEOs pause or not make decisions at all, right? Which is problematic for an economy. What we provide in Florida is the direct contrast to that. Complete certainty
Yeah.
that your capital is going to be safe here and that it's going to go to what you want it to go to.
Yeah.
And that our tax structure isn't going to change. Our
Right.
Constitution requires no personal income tax in the state of Florida. That's not going to change. And we've got a government who's a partner to your growth,
Yeah.
like we were talking about earlier.
Partners versus being, adversarial.
That's right. So all of that comes together to kind of create a perfect environment. And this is credit, yes, we give credit to all the people working on the ground in cities like Miami. Also credit to leadership in Tallahassee
Yeah,
over the
Ron
last decade
DeSantis, yeah.
by creating this environment that allows companies to come here and scale at such a rate because the system's built for it, right? We've got talent, we've got infrastructure. To your point, we've got the ability to construct quickly because the permitting process is reasonable. And you've got partnership with government, unlike many other cities around the country right now.
It feels like Florida has really reached escape velocity. And it's just, we're in a super cycle. And not only are we winning the population, we're winning businesses, we're winning now in the tech industry, which
Yep.
is unheard of. A lot of these names of Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Page, the Googles, Palantir this week announcing that they're moving their headquarters. They can't be the last tech company, so there has to be more. What are, you mentioned, uncertainty in these other states. So comparing Florida to other places that people are coming from, and you're on a council with other leaders like yourself in other states. What are they saying about their states? What questions are they asking and looking to us as leading the charge?
We've kind of take for granted here in Florida safety and security as guarantees, right? Which is different than a lot of other markets around the country. So I think,
Chicago.
when you think about the friction points that we don't see here as a product of a state that prioritizes safety and security of its citizens, not that other states don't, but it is a core priority of Florida. I mean, you live here, you kind of see it and feel it. I think that's where a lot of other places are kind of saying, all right, I can kind of see the value of that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of, Citadel's move, it's highly documented from Chicago, is a lot of that was safety and security. Yep. So when you talk to CEOs out of market and even in market, the one thing they care most about is their employees.
Yeah.
And if your employees don't feel safe leaving the office at 7 o'clock and walking home, you can't functionally operate there any longer. That's kind of the core promise you're making to your employees, that they can come to work and go home safely.
A no-brainer.
Yeah. So that's where these are challenges that we didn't anticipate, right, in some of these other markets, but they are becoming real challenges now that the business community is forced to focus on, because the erosion of that level of safety and security leads to an erosion of capital and employees and investment. So I think they're completely right to be focusing on it, but it is an interesting contrast to our ability to focus just on opportunity, right? So to your point about being kind of past the point of no return here in Florida, now our challenge is, let's get this right.
Yeah.
Let's make sure that this level and rate of growth benefits everyone in the state, not just the people in these dense urban environments that are really benefiting from increased growth, and figure out ways to connect this growth to the rest of Florida so that everybody feels the upside of it and everybody feels the benefit, and then communicate that clearly so that there's trust in government and in the private sector that this is going to continue in a way that's beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, it's good for capital, it's good for business,
That's
it's
right.
good for investment. We're also seeing, as real estate developers, we have a partnership with a Belgian developer. And one of the comments that they make when they come here, they say, everyone is so positive. Everyone, the future is so bright in Miami, in Florida, and they want to bring their capital here. And they're fighting in Europe some of the same problems that we're seeing in some of these other cities and states of being anti-business, anti-investment, anti-growth. So we're attracting a lot in the U.S. domestically. What are you seeing from international capital, international businesses looking to Florida?
Yeah, so I'm on the board of Select Florida, which is our state's economic development outfit that looks at international opportunities, right? And most recently in the last year, you've seen us sign great relationships with places like Italy around yacht building, right?
Yeah.
A huge sector for us where those transcontinental relationships can add real value to our industry and theirs. So we've got offices all over the world that look at opportunities that are aligned with Florida's economy and then bring those back and connect them to our ecosystem here. And we run missions also around the world to make sure that Florida companies are getting exposure in these international markets, particularly around aerospace and defense, huge global industry that we've got a huge base of assets here on off the back of our military assets across the state that we also under leverage, right? So it's all of these things and getting it out to market. So to your earlier point, people in California or Belgium understand the sophistication of our private sector and really what Florida is capable of, and getting that communication across.
It can't be all positive in Florida, and every state, every city, every government has its challenges. What are some of the challenges that we're facing here in Florida? And resiliency is one of them. Storms. Let's talk about what we're seeing and how we're preparing.
Yeah, and that's a majority of what the council's work is. So yes, we focus a lot on the growth and the opportunistic side, but core to our work is what are the challenges, right, that we're facing over the next 20 years, and how are we going to fix them? So when you go around the state and talk to CEOs, the number one thing we hear from them is resilience, water, right? After a storm, it can really knock out a main street, take small businesses out. Even a couple feet of water can lead to vacancies for a period of time. That's a huge issue. So we did a big piece of work over the last 6 months on resilience and put it out publicly. Modernizing our permitting statewide, making sure that people are building above FEMA flood maps and giving them the density they need above that map to build back what they had, even though they're building it higher, right? So make sure it's fair and that the rules respond to the reality of flood maps that are changing, right? And make sure that the state is nimble and diligent in refining that. The other interesting thing about resiliency is when you think about it from an opportunistic perspective, we should be commercializing all of these cool resilience products that are being developed in Miami and Tampa and selling them to every waterfront jurisdiction in the world. We are first exposed. We're developing really unique products here in Florida with innovative entrepreneurs. And what we haven't done is really turn that IP into a local industry that we can own in Florida globally. So that's one of the other things we're focused on at the council is how do you take this challenge that we're solving for through the ingenuity of Floridians already and then scale that commercialization to turn it into an economic industry for all Floridians that they can work in over the next century as we solve these problems for the world.
Absolutely. We're definitely on the forefront of solving this and preparing for resiliency, storms, flooding. Are there any misconceptions about Florida that people around the country and maybe around the world, statistics that you want to get out there and kind of answer and demystify?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones is talent.
Okay.
People just don't think they're going to get talent in Florida like they can get in New York or San Francisco.
Yeah.
And it's just not the case. So we have, I mean, UCF's a great example out of Orlando. They've built this incredible engineering school on the back of NASA for the last 50 years. And people forget that the space program really started at Cape Canaveral. And we've got this industrial engineering background. IBM invented the personal computer in Florida. Henry Flagler was a unbelievable innovator running rail track from here down to Key West. So you've got this culture of entrepreneurship and innovation and risk taking throughout the history of Florida. And now it's just kind of applying that same culture to this incredible growth opportunity, which I think could lead to incredible opportunities for all Floridians. But back to your question on, it was on the challenges, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
So a lot of people still think about Florida, to your point before, Southern Californians think about mosquitoes, right?
Yeah.
In hot weather.
Yeah, my sister, she still lives there. She's like,
Yeah.
oh, we have bugs.
I think we want to get that right, that there's actually talent here. There's a highly sophisticated private sector that's focused on the entire state of Florida and driving growth for everybody. And there's a spot for everybody. So we've got, it's not just financial services or commercial real estate or development. It's healthcare, it's life sciences, it's wellness and longevity. I mean, look at IMG in Bradenton kind of putting out the top 20 draft picks to the NFL every year and the operation that they're running around sports. We've got all of these really interesting sub-economies that exist throughout the state of Florida that if you graduated from any of our 12 state university system schools, you could pick a place to be and be in a complete, you could be an aerospace engineer for Lockheed Martin, or you could be a soccer coach at IMG and still have this really fulfilling career and lifestyle that generates value for the state's economic ecosystem. So I would say people don't understand the diversity of our economy, the resilience of it, because it is so geographically diverse as well. If a hurricane hits Tampa, we still have Miami and Palm Beach and Orlando and Jacksonville that are going to run, right? We're not going to go to zero or go dark.
Right.
So I think people underplay the strength of the state economy from that perspective and think we're still over-reliant on hospitality and tourism to drive our entire ecosystem, which is critically important and has put Florida on the map for a half a century. But what we're saying is, in addition to that, we can diversify and scale and provide opportunity for even more people.
You're strengthening West Palm Beach. Wells Fargo just announced they're moving their private wealth division to West Palm. I just had Brian Gale here, on a top office broker. And many of the tenants that he mentioned in these buildings are financial firms.
That's right.
The Apollos of the world. Blackstone has an office. So there's Thoma Bravo, one of the largest private equity firms. Peter Thiel, Founders Fund. So we're diversifying the base. We have great stats. Getting the message out is highly important to the rest of the country and the rest of the world. How are you thinking about, in your role, putting the word out there, having these conversations, and really communicating the wins and benefits of Florida?
Yeah, so we're doing it aggressively. And it's starting with this campaign called Ambition Accelerated that we launched a couple of weeks ago. And again, the purpose of that is to get this information out to key decision makers and key markets around the country. This isn't a broad-based grassroots campaign for everyone in America to know what's going on in Florida. We want people who are thinking about, all right, where's my next investment for my business going to be? And we want Florida to be on that list for the reasons we're defining, which are based in substance, right? This isn't kind of a made-up set of facts.
Not pie in the sky.
This is the reality of what's happening here, and we just have a gap in people's understanding of that reality versus what it is. So we're going to correct for that over the next couple of years by communicating directly to decision makers and thought leaders. And the other thing we're going to do is maintain the private sector as a resource and asset for government, but also for people coming to market. So when new CEOs come to Florida, or for new companies come here and they need to know the lay of the land or understand kind of, where do I want to be? What's the right place for my employees? The council's a network for that. Lean into us. We can have a private conversation with a couple of CEOs and someone from California to help them understand discreetly kind of what it's actually like to run a business here, what it's like for your family to live here, right? Those are all conversations that are highly relevant when people are making big economic decisions. It's not just the employees and the business, it's also when that CEO goes home and talks to her husband or his wife and says, thinking about moving us from San Jose to Miami, what do you think?
Right.
That input is a valuable piece of the
Absolutely.
decision process. So if we can help with that kind of soft sell as well by doing a better job explaining to people what it's actually like here, that only benefits the ecosystem.
Ken Griffin, Steve Ross, powerhouses in the business community. Who else is involved? There's other key business leaders. Let's talk about some other names on the council that you work with.
Sure. So, I mean, we've got pretty much every CEO around the state of Florida. But again, we want CEOs who are willing to commit their time to the state, right? So this isn't a networking group. This isn't a place where you find deals for your business. This is really civic-minded CEOs who want to give back because Florida has been so good to them and their businesses, and ensure that that environment maintains itself for the next 50 years. So that's really the group of CEOs that I'm so fortunate to work with every day. But it's key leaders around law firms here in Miami, Bills and Sundberg and Al Dotson, and kind of all the big firms, all the big real estate developers. They're all actively engaged in civically figuring out kind of what is the right approach for Florida and what are the right tools that we need to bring to market to continue the growth that we're seeing today. From Publix to kind of right on down the list, every industry is represented, aerospace and defense, particularly in the Orlando and Space Coast area. I think with Blue Origin and some of these companies coming to market, we've got opportunities that could be more than a century in the future, right? And the next Silk Road could be from here to Mars, right? And to have that be based in Florida is an interesting asset, right? For a single state to have when you think about global exploration of when you think about global exploration of space. So I think sky's the limit on what's possible here.
Absolutely.
And our asset, again, is kind of all of these diverse CEOs putting all that they know from their industries and experiences toward this Florida-focused solution is what really is the magic and drives the value in what we do.
Feels like Florida has a lot of magic right now. And
does.
speaking of CEOs, we just had some major CEOs move here, buy homes in South Florida. Larry Page, Sergey Brin, Mark Zuckerberg, Peter Thiel's been here. Palantir is moving. What are you seeing from the tech industry in your conversations?
Yeah, I think exactly what you described. You're seeing momentum that's just accelerating at a pace that people haven't seen before. Right? And I think that's due to a number of factors, many of which are out of our control. But what Florida's been able to do is quietly build an ecosystem and infrastructure that when people are ready to stick their head up and see what the other option is, we're primed for their growth. So I think that's what's happening now, right? People are noticing. And the work that Melissa and Manny and kind of all of these other folks have done in Miami over the last 10 years to create this environment and prepare, and Mayor Suarez and others, for this opportunity has arrived. So now you're seeing capital come to these greased skids, right? Where you can kind of come and just accelerate faster than you anticipated previously.
Just plug in.
That's right.
The base.
That's what's remarkable about this moment in Florida. Because it's always been there, but now we've kind of got the capital inflow and the ecosystem to fund and the connectivity to larger corporate partners to sell into, and the work we're doing to kind of organize that ecosystem for people to access it on the entrepreneurial side through some of the accelerators we're running. We're able to aggregate markets on behalf of the state just through our CEOs. So we run a fintech accelerator with Emerge and Related Ross here in Southeast Florida. And what we bring to the table is we've got a dozen bank CEOs in Florida who are part of the program. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're meeting with a CEO. You're not burning 6 months of capital figuring out the right phone call to make. You're getting a no or a yes or a tweak this and it's a yes, which is extraordinarily valuable if you're a growing company on borrowed capital. So we are kind of activating the ecosystem around the best bets that I described earlier by literally aggregating the market on behalf of the next generation of entrepreneurs and putting on a silver platter the opportunity to sell into. But what we're saying to them is you got to come to Florida for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
You've got to live here, work here, and experience it. And you've got to develop a product that helps our companies that are here be more efficient and more competitive out of market. So it works for everybody. And we had 20 companies in our 2 cohorts this last summer, and 3 have already committed to moving to Florida as a result. So to your point, there's magic happening.
Yeah.
And if you've got the infrastructure built and you know what your asset set is and you know what you're focused on, you can really put the pieces together and move the needle quickly.
So you're really focused on results, bring them here so they experience it, investing in them, and people are welcoming it and they are making the move.
That's right.
That's right.
And we're seeing it in real time, which is incredible.
And Florida is, it feels like it's maturing and changing its image from, this humid place, travel destination. So it's diversified. Key businesses are moving here, top executives, CEOs. What are you excited about for the rest of 2026? What are some of your top priorities?
So our top priorities are, again, the challenges, making sure we stay focused on getting the environment right. So what we just talked about, making sure that infrastructure is built, that doesn't change. So we've got to stick to those fundamentals: affordable housing, resiliency, infrastructure that can move people to and from work, right? And that talent pipeline. All of that has to stay grade A for all of the rest of this opportunity to work. So that's core to what we do. And then the exciting part is, right, going out of market and telling Florida's story.
Yeah.
And saying, you're not going to believe what's happening here. You're going to miss out unless you move fast. So we are thrilled with the momentum that we're getting off of this campaign. And I think the national media that the campaign brought to the state to kind of reset some of that narrative around Florida is really starting to stick and gain momentum. We're going to continue pushing at that, but we're also going to continue to fix the things that we see as long-term structural issues that the state needs to get right in an effort for that to maintain the rate of growth that we're seeing currently.
And Michael, for those business leaders, executives, companies, people that are looking to Florida, looking to make the move, where do they find you? How do they get in touch with you, your team?
Sure, happy to. So ambitionaccelerated.com is the campaign site. There's a lot of information on there about Florida, about the opportunity, about the talent pipeline, the business environment. And then fc100.org is our website. And that's really where we have all of our policy work there. So affordable housing work, resilience work, the Beyond Sunshine paper that really identifies our growth sectors, that's all there. People can reach out anytime. We're available. We love to work with people and help them develop unique partnerships to help Florida grow.
Michael, you're doing an amazing job. Thanks for being on The Long Game.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.